All right, guys, welcome. We got a special episode this week. We are traveling. We are here in the hot shop, and we are joined by our friends Greg and Trent from the Hilltop Artists. Greg and Trent, what are we doing today?
Hey, so today we're gonna, Taylor from Alchemy Skateboarding is going to show us a demo on stenciling our skateboards. And so, because of the COVID thing and because we're not actually blowing glass right now, we came up with this idea for the production kids to do paint their own skateboards. And so we're gonna kind of move forward with that. This is Trent. Trent's another instructor here at Hilltop Artists. You want to say a few things?
I'm just happy to be here. Taylor's going to show us how to stencil. I've never done it before, so it's going to be a learning experience for me and hopefully for you watching.
Sweet, let's get to it.
All right.
So, several youth that are working with the Hilltop Artists here are going to be receiving blank skateboards. And to help you guys decorate and add graphics to your skateboards, we decided we would give you a good starting spot. So we went ahead and made a stack of stencils that have the Alchemy logo and the Hilltop Artist logo. And if you've never used stencils before, that's what we're doing here today. We're gonna show you how to take this little piece of paper, apply it to our skateboard, and we're gonna go over a couple different methods depending on what kind of tools you guys have accessible. So first things first, let's decide, what do you think, Trent, vertical graphic or horizontal graphic? Go at an angle, go, if we want all of it.
I think vertical, but maybe at an angle.
At an angle.
Yeah.
And then something there.
Something in there, yeah.
Cool. All right, so you mentioned you haven't done much stenciling before?
I have not.
All right, so the basic principle of stencils obviously is we have areas cut out, that's where our paint's gonna go through, and we've blocked the other areas, and so that's how we're gonna transfer this image. So one of the most important parts of using a stencil is making sure that we adhere this to our skateboard. We don't wanna start spraying and have it move. It's gonna ruin our stencil. So my favorite way to work with stencils is a spray adhesive. It's from 3M, it's called Super 77 spray. Basically, it's glue in a can that we can lightly spray on the back of the stencil. It's not gonna glue it permanently to the board, but it's gonna help keep it from moving around. So I'm gonna do that for this one, and then I'll show you a couple other cheats in case you or the viewers don't have this Super 77 spray. So let's make sure our nose is going this way, so we don't want our graphic upside down. Let's see. How do you feel about like a little bit of crop?
That's fine.
Works there?
Yeah.
All right, so with that spray adhesive, we get to push this down all flat. Now the next question before we actually throw paint on there is, there's something called overspray. When we're working with stencils, all of this area right here is kind of open, fair game. So if we're spraying, this is gonna catch some of that color. Some people do that intentionally because it looks cool. Some people do it by accident. We wanna make sure we're being intentional, so we're gonna make a choice. Do you think it would be nicer to have our color overspray over the boundary of our stencil, or we can take some paper and cover it up so it's just this logo? Do you have any preferences?
Let's go with the overspray.
Cool. I was also thinking overspray, but I didn't want to say it. All right, so that means we're not gonna have to cover anything else up. Again, if you're working with your stencil and you want it to be just a very clean, simple logo, take some additional paper, tape, whatever you need to cover up those areas. Pretty much everything will get a little bit of paint on it during this process. No matter how long you've been doing it, I'm still overspraying, you'll be overspraying, so plan for that. Let's pick some colors. So we got a red base. Favorite color, or what do you think? You know, we can pick one or two colors and do a color fade.
Let's pick a couple colors. Are we gonna do this one too, or no?
We are gonna do this one
Okay.
as well. Yeah, let's switch gears actually. That's a good point. We're gonna talk about multi-layer stencils, and then we're gonna come back and drop our paint on our single color. So, I have brought with me a stencil that I have made in the past. It's a famous movie monster, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Here is but one layer. So the reason I brought this is stencils can be one single layer. You paint it once, you have your image and you're done. Or you can break that image into multiple layers. So that way you can accommodate lots of color fades, shadows, highlights. You can get some photorealism. So we're gonna start this process right now. We're gonna take our layer 1 is this big empty shape. So we're gonna start with this, and we're gonna do the same thing we did with our other stencil. We wanna make sure this thing lays down nice and flat. So we're gonna dust the back. And I brought some nice watercolor paper, so this guy should look real nice and proper when we're done. All right, and of course, it's the creature from the Black Lagoon. We're gonna get some greens, and let's test this out. Always have a piece of scrap or something to test your cans on. You don't want to go right to paper and find out you have a clogged cap. All right, so we have a super light green. I'm gonna hold this up. Now I could do this as one solid color green, and it would look kind of cartoony and poppy. I want it to look a little bit more real, and so that's where we're gonna use a couple green tones. It's gonna give us a little bit of variety. And the creature from the Black Lagoon, this is his head, and all of our heads are round. And so to show a little bit of that rounding, we're gonna take a darker green, and we're gonna dust a little bit just on the side here. Now the really important thing for multicolored stencils is when we go to add our next layers, we wanna make sure they're lined up, right? Yeah. So his face isn't drifting over to the side. So one of the easiest cheats I've found for that is each of my stencils is the exact same size. It's a piece of 8.5 by 11 paper. So if I paint the corners of my paper, whenever I peel this layer off, let's go ahead and do it right now, we're gonna see exactly where I need to put my next layer. So on layer 2, all I really have to do is line up the edges of my paper, and it's gonna line up. So we're gonna set this aside to dry. We never want to layer up stencils on wet work. It's gonna peel the paint that we just put on there. So as that dries, let's go back. We're gonna revisit our skateboard here. We were talking about color choices. I got purples, blues, greens.
Well, traditionally it's like orange and black, but I think we should do something different. So maybe like that purple and the blue?
Purple, blue, yeah. And we can do a little bit of a color fade, so we'll have both of those colors kind of meet in the middle, I think. All right, so. And for our overspray, do you think we should try to overspray the whole board so it's a solid color, or should we overspray and let it kind of fuzz out into the red?
I'm thinking maybe just the fuzz out, and then when we add some other layers, see how it turns.
Exactly what I wanted to hear. That's what I was thinking. Perfect. All right, so we'll start off with, do you think purple top, blue bottom, or blue top, purple bottom?
Let's do a purple bottom.
I suppose we're talking top and bottom. We could also go vertical.
Just like
purple
split?
and blue, yeah. I think.
I haven't seen that, so let's try that.
Let's do that. All right, so we'll drop our purple. So we're gonna do a vertical color fade here. We're gonna have purple on this side, blue on this side. They're gonna meet in the middle. And so I just tested out this can, got good paint flow. Again, double check, make sure your stencil's not lifting up. Anywhere that paper's lifting, paint's gonna get under there and it's gonna kind of muddy up your image. So we're gonna just slowly dust our paint. When you're working with aerosols, especially as a beginner, but really all the time, resist the urge to click and hold. If we're blasting that paint, this is pressurized air, so that's gonna give the paint an opportunity to get under our stencil, or it's gonna build up too quick and it's gonna run and create drips. Drips are fun when you want them, drips are no fun when you don't want them. So again, kind of slow layers, just building up little bits of purple. We're gonna leave it kind of raw at the top and the bottom. And I want my purple to go a little further than I need it to, so that our blue is gonna lay on top of it. And that way we're gonna have a nice clean seam. So we got our purple layer in. Let's go ahead and test our blue before we use it. Same thing, slow dusting. And what do you think? More or less on top and bottom? It's relatively centered right now. Kind of like it's a little lopsided.
I like the lopsidedness.
Digging it there? All right, so before we officially peel our stencil, it's gonna be really hard to put it back on if we made a mistake. So I always just take a look and make sure that I'm happy with the amount of paint on there. What do you think? Are we thin in any spots?
It looks good.
Sweet. So, once it looks good, these are paper stencils. We don't want to tear them off. They will probably rip. We're gonna just kind of slowly lift up from the corners. And now we've got a blue to purple color fade Hilltop Artist X Alchemy stencil. So we've got our first layer done here on our skateboard. We're gonna come back to this and show you some other workarounds in case you don't have spray paint or spray adhesives. But we're gonna pick up our 3 to 5 layer stencil here. So we've got our background layer, and what we're gonna do right now, like we talked about, is we're gonna add layer 2. So this is where it starts to get fun. We start to get a little bit of detail coming in. So we're gonna use the same process. Take our spray adhesive, lightly dust the back. Again, we're hoping this isn't permanent. And to line it up, again, we have those nice corner blasts. So my only job right now is to get this one piece of paper right into the corner where our previous piece of paper was. And then we'll gently tap down all of our edges. So we've got our stencil in place. And let's go ahead and pick a color. So this is gonna be a shadow layer. So we want it to be a little darker than the previous layers so that it stands out. We're gonna use a mixture of like kind of a dark forest green, and then we're gonna kind of go ahead and spatter a little bit of brown in there as well. Again, different colors creates texture. Texture creates a little bit more movement. I think it makes a little bit more fun of a stencil. So let's start off with kind of our mountain forest green. Yeah, I'll hold this up. So if you've never worked with spray cans before, generally they're not very happy pointed down. They are designed to be used vertically. You can spray them on a horizontal surface, but if you have the opportunity to work vertically, your paint flow is gonna be a lot more even. Your can's gonna be a little more accurate. So. And again, we don't wanna blast it, we're gonna dust. So little bits, slowly building it up. We've covered probably about 90% of it with that. We're gonna switch over to our brown. And you get some fun effects when you're working with wet paint on wet paint. If I were to let that dry, this brown is really gonna stand out. But because that green is still wet, if I dust this brown over, they're gonna actually kind of merge a little bit. And that's what we're looking for, is kind of some of that textural variety. And again, I'm doing shadows on this side to kind of round his head out. And lucky for us, it's a stencil, so it's perfect when it's not perfect, so we're not gonna overthink it. Let's go ahead and peel layer 2. And peeling your layers, the more delicate your layers are, the more delicate you wanna be while peeling them. I don't really wanna recut this stencil, so I'm gonna take my time and work all the way around the image. Take that off, and we got 2 layers, so it's already starting to actually look a little bit like our friendly creature. We've still got some more details and some titles to come in here to finish it off. But overall, I'm happy with our little color fade. We can see we've got some more shadows coming in on this end. We're gonna let this layer dry, and we're gonna switch it up and go back and talk about our Hilltop Artist stencil for a little bit. So for those of you looking to use your stencils at home and you don't have access to spray adhesive and spray paints, don't worry, we're gonna talk about using a traditional brush and acrylic paints right now. So Trent is volunteered to be our tester here, and we've gone ahead and mixed up an orange color, and so we have no spray adhesive on this. Because we're not using our aerosol, what we can do to hold the stencil in place is, Trent, you're literally gonna use that left hand, yeah, and just pick a spot where you can kind of put a little bit of pressure. And I think the whole goal is to just really lightly push that paint around on the paper. Yeah, and I would pretend that you're just painting a big orange block. Don't worry too much about the individual shapes. I think that's, we're gonna just kind of slowly work that brush, yeah, all the way through. That's looking perfect. So if you have limited experience with acrylic paints at home, make sure you're not using too much water. We don't want a really runny paint. We have almost no water in our paint right now. That is just the viscosity from the paint itself. That's gonna prevent, hopefully, runs under our stencil. And again, make sure you're holding it down. Trent's killing it right now. I've seen that stencil not budge at all. And so far, application looks good. It's like you've done it 100 times.
I'm just going back, making sure that I filled every little spot.
Yep, and sometimes changing your vantage, I notice, yeah, you're moving around and looking, making sure that you've got clean, nice orange coverage all the way throughout it.
I think it's good.
It feels good. Why don't you set that brush down and
Moment of truth.
let's have you go ahead and, yeah, grab it from the corners and just slowly peel it up. And it looks like we can use stencils at home with no spray paint at all. Sweet. So we're gonna let this guy dry, and then we'll come back and we're gonna use that same technique and we'll paint our Alchemy logo over there next to it on the side. But overall, man, that looks great.
Looks great, yeah.
That orange color is perfect. We're on brand. Right on. So switching gears back over to our creech stencil here, we're gonna go ahead and this is gonna be our final layer for the character himself. Then we're gonna add our little title piece. So our final layer here is kind of our deep shadows and our outlines. So we're looking at using really dark tones, including black, to really pop off of that underlying color work that we've done. So same as it was in the last 2 times, a little bit of spray adhesive, just a nice dusting. And then again, corner to corner. Make sure if you're doing multicolor that you give yourself a lot of overspray. Otherwise, it's gonna be really hard to line these layers up. All right, so we've got him layered in right where he needs to be. And I'm gonna start off with sort of some dark blue and brown tones. Again, to create a little bit of depth for him. And I will come back and finish it with a flat black. So, test our blue. Again, we're gonna go vertical because it makes our cams happy. And again, slowly dusting. So we got some blue on there. Let's switch gears, let's do a little bit of brown. And again, the further away I am from my piece, the more I'm gonna get a small residual amount of dust as opposed to solid color. So I always recommend get a piece of plywood or a big sheet of paper and practice playing around with your tools. You know, you can just sit out there for hours making little lines, different shading. The more you play with this stuff, the more fun they get and the better you get at it. So we've got our color in there and we're gonna finish it off. Again, we want this last layer to really have heavy detail work. So we're gonna finish it and make it almost entirely black, and hopefully we leave just a little bit of that brown and blue tone in there. So again, I'm not looking for a solid, perfect black. We want a little bit of texture in there. Let's go ahead and peel off our 3rd layer. And we've got ourselves a little creature from the Black Lagoon. So we're gonna let this layer dry. We're gonna come back and do our final 2 layers. It's a title text based off of where this image came from. Let's switch gears back to our skateboard one more time and let's throw down an Alchemy logo. Stencils are a really great way to add graphics to your board, but it's not everyone's cup of tea and there's nothing wrong with that. So there's a variety of other materials, including, like we mentioned, our acrylic paints and brushes. You can get in there and just freestyle with a brush. I love using paint pens. I'm a big fan of illustration and drawing, and so something with a more distinct tip than a brush is really helpful for me. And so you can literally rough draft with pencil. You can just drop a paint pen right on the board and go for it. What I'm gonna do right now is we're gonna try to see if I can put a little drop shadow on this graphic with a paint pen to make it pop just a little bit more. And to, again, just remind you there's a variety of tools and options for you to put different colors and images on your board. So for a drop shadow, I'm gonna pick the bottom and the left line of each letter, and I'm just gonna trace on the left and bottom of every letter. It's gonna give us a little bit of 3D effect. And again, if you've never worked with these tools before, I always recommend practice on some scrap paper. Make sure you're comfortable with the tool you're using. before you go to your final product. It's gonna save you a lot of heartache. The nice thing about this being a skateboard is if you do paint something you don't love, it is a wooden deck, you can sand off that graphic and try it again. But again, I like to work smart, not hard. I don't wanna have to resand this whole skateboard, so taking my time, and I'm just again following the left and bottom edge of each of these letters. And again, these are gonna be your skateboards. Do whatever you would like with them for your graphic. Draw a smiley face, a sunrise, a sunset. Draw a skateboard on a skateboard. You have endless opportunities to put whatever you want onto this board that you are then gonna ride. So, yeah, kind of helps give it a little bit more depth. So again, these guys are the Posca paint pens. They work great for this application. They dry relatively quickly. I'm gonna go in and we'll put some drop shadows on the Alchemy logo as well. And it's important, especially if you're working with acrylic paints in general, we don't want too much texture on our skateboard. It could start to get in the way for board slides, nose slides, certain tricks. So try to work with a thinner amount of material. Again, if you build up too much, sand it off, or it's okay to have texture on your board if you don't need your board to do specific things. So we're gonna go ahead and put some drop shadows on our Alchemy logo, and then we'll go ahead and revisit our top graphic, and we'll cap things off with finishing up our creature stencil. All right, coming back over here to our creature, we've got one final layer that we're gonna put in, and that's our title card. This image is from an old magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, and so we've got our text up here, and this is most assuredly the best issue ever. So what I wanna do with this layer is I wanna separate the colors of these two texts, and so we're gonna do it in one single layer. And again, we're gonna start like we always do with a little bit of spray adhesive, slowly coating that whole paper. We don't want it to move. We got a lot of fine detail we don't want to lose track of. We're gonna line up our corners. Top corners lined up. Bottom corners lined up. And gently push that stencil down flat, making sure that it's not lifting up anywhere. We don't want any opportunity for paint to make its own decisions. We want it to go where we want it to go. So I mentioned we want to split up these two colors here. So I'm gonna use one stencil, and what I'm gonna do is take a piece of scrap paper and I'm gonna cover my top text. We're gonna do the bottom, let it dry, switch it over, and that way we can get multiple colors going on one layer. So it's always nice to have some scrap paper around for testing tools or using to cover up areas. And again, I'm gonna use a little bit of spray adhesive. And we're gonna do the best issue ever text first. And we're gonna do that in red. We want that to really pop off of the page. And the other title text, we're gonna do kind of some green and blue color fades because after all, it is the creature from the Black Lagoon. We need greens and blues in there. So we've covered up where we don't want our paint. We've left open where we do want our paint. And always test our cans before we go to our page. It'd be a shame to ruin it now. All right, we've got decent paint flow. Let's add some paint. So we're gonna let that red layer dry. And looking at it, I can see some of my under paint coming through. I'm gonna put a little more red on there. We're gonna let that layer dry, switch that paper over, do our final title. We're gonna jump back over to our skateboard, wrap that up, and then we're gonna be done for the day. All right, bringing it back to our top graphic here. Trent's gonna go ahead and lay down our final layer here on the Alchemy logo, just like we did before. So nice smooth brush strokes. It's looking perfect. And we can see he's got his left hand on the stencil, making sure that it's not moving. Let me know if you need any more paint. If it's too thin, we can always thicken it up.
I think it was a little thin, but I think I might have fixed it.
And I like seeing the way Trent's doing this is he's doing downward and upward strokes.
Trying to fill it in.
Yeah, I think it's good to come from multiple angles like that. Let's see, I'll sneak around and put just a little more paint in that tray for you. So it is looking a little thin. So, top right corner of that section's got some fresher paint for you.
Sweet.
Look at her. Awesome.
Sweet.
Go ahead and peel her off. And so I know the Alchemy portion of the stencil is a little extra delicate, but yep, exactly like that, come from the bottom.
Oh.
All right, we got a little bit of blowout. That was, so this is, for you guys watching at home, if your paint is too watered down, you're gonna get a little bit of run. I don't feel bad about it, and if we want, while that paint's still wet, we can take a paper towel, we can wipe it off, we can go in there with paint pens and add detail work, really whatever we want to do. The nice thing about arts and crafts, in my experience, is you can never really make a mistake. You can only create opportunities to adjust. So it's looking sweet. We can maybe clean it up a little bit, and yeah, we're gonna finish up the creature stencil, and then we'll get out of your hair here.
Sweet.
So we're down here to the very end. We've got one section left to stencil. We've got our red in the best issue ever text. We're gonna do the same thing we did. We're gonna coat our extra piece of paper to cover up all of that red color work we've done. And we're gonna drop some more appropriate yellow, green, blue, kind of creature from the Black Lagoon color fades. So again, a light amount of spray adhesive. I don't wanna glue this paper to my stencil. And let's pick out some good colors. Oh yeah, we're gonna start with this one. So as I've been doing, of course, always test your can before you go to paper. Excellent. We're gonna go ahead and hold this guy up and lightly dust this super monster green. We don't wanna leave it just like that. We're gonna come back in and do a little bit of darker green. A little bit of speckles in there. Then we're gonna take our blue and we're gonna put a little bit of blue tone in there as well to wrap it up. So I put a little more blue than I want. So luckily for me, I'm working with aerosols. I'm gonna go back in and put a little bit more of my green. And you can just keep bouncing back and forth until you get it exactly the way you want. Be careful though, you don't want to end up building up 1/4 inch of paint on your paper. It's going to make your paper really brittle. So you do have a somewhat limited number of times you can add paint. And I'm just bringing that blue line back down just a little bit so it's a little more even. Let's take our buffer layer off. So we can see that allowed us to have multicolor in our text. And then we'll peel this layer very gently off of our print. And again, sometimes you gotta work it from all angles. And we now have a finished creature from the Black Lagoon, best issue ever. Last thing we're gonna do, whenever you're making art, put your name on it, date it, sign it, number it. This is gonna be a gift to the folks here at Hilltop Artists. So we're gonna sign this and date it, we're gonna leave it behind. And we're gonna talk about one last thing with our skateboard, and that's how to finish it once we're done with our artwork.
Alrighty, action.
So the very last step, once you've gone ahead and finished your graphic, whatever it is, if you're using the pre-made stencil, if you're making your own stencils, if you're free-handing it, whatever it is, before you go out and ride that skateboard that you've just put all that work into, we have one last step, and that's clear coating. We want to put a layer of clear paint or lacquer over all of that lovely artwork that you've done to help seal it in there and prevent it from chipping, flaking, and falling off of your board. If you don't have access to polyurethanes and clear coats, lucky for you, we are so stoked to be working with the Hilltop Artists because you guys can bring those boards back that you've finished. We'll pick them up, we'll clear coat them for you, and then we'll get them back to you guys. So as you're finishing your projects at home, stay in touch with your instructors and find a time to drop off those boards. We'll get them all clear coated and finished. The last thing that we need to do here is we gotta sign our artwork. So I got to do this awesome collab with Trent. I'm gonna go ahead and drop my name on here, and then I will pass the pen over to Trent. And this is a really fun, wide-tipped paint pen, so really not excellent for fine details, but we're gonna make it work. And then I always like to put the date, because otherwise I forget what years I've done things in. So, I got my name 2020, wherever you want to sign it, anywhere on that board. We just always sign our work because hopefully we're proud of it.
I just touched the bottom.
Oh yeah, the top and bottom. I like it.
Sweet.
Awesome. As you guys are working on your boards at home, feel free to reach out if you guys have questions, if you need clarification on anything. You can find us on social media, Alchemy Skateboarding. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. Drop us a question. We'll help coach you through it as best we can. And if you needed a little extra incentive to come up with a cool design, Alchemy's currently running a design your own board contest. So we are looking to you, our skaters and our community members, to come up with your best Alchemy design. We're gonna pick our favorite and actually do a limited production run of your artwork. So for more information, check us out online, alchemyskate.org, or find us on social media. All the details for things you need to know about that project and these programs, they're all living out there on the internet. So once again, thank you to Trent. Thank you to the entire Hilltop Artist crew for letting us come barge your space, play with our paint. We're very excited to see what you guys can create, and we'll see you next time.